Hey, welcome back. I got a surprise attack I wasn't expecting. We changed our guests, as you can see. I've got Honorary Colonel Charles Chuck Mercier. If he looks a little bit like the mayor, former mayor of Scugog, it's the same guy. Yes. And then I have a retired Sergeant Rod Henderson. Rod's our, a historian with the regiment. That's right. I'm going to get a lot of questions going your way. And then I've got Jeremy Blower down the end, the executive director of the Ontario Regiment Museum located at the Oshawa Airport. I'm going to start right with you because there's two museums up there, is there not? Or is there just one?
Well, there's actually just one.
Okay.
It has two different names.
All right.
But we are officially the Ontario Regiment Museum.
Okay, so that's where we see all the tanks and all that. Is that in the right place?
That's the right place.
Okay, all right. What do you guys, like you guys have got a great website. What do you have up there as far as equipment goes?
Well, we actually have Canada's largest collection of operational military vehicles. Right here in the Durham region, most people don't know. Mm-hmm. It goes from jeeps, trucks, armored personnel carriers, and tanks. So the word's starting to get out that we have this large collection, and people are actually starting to come and see it. They can see actual tanks and other military vehicles in action in our museum. Yeah.
Okay, very cool. Okay, Chuck, I'm going to come to you, and I probably should have started since you're the honorary colonel anyways. I'm just so geared up because I think there's movie opportunities for the museum up there too and that stuff. Tell us about Oshawa's oldest secret, which is the 150th anniversary coming up here of the regiment.
You know, this regiment, the Ontario Regiment, our regiment, started in Ontario County. Which is now Durham Region.
And that was before Canada was in Confederation, right?
Before Confederation, men and women have volunteered and served their country from every municipality in the Durham region. In every major conflict, we sent 54 soldiers over to Afghanistan. Last year we had a soldier in the Ivory Coast, one in Poland. We had 5 just up at the Syrian Refugee Intake Center in Kingston, CFB Kingston. So we're very active. We're always recruiting soldiers. They train up, and they're doing a great job.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. So Chuck, it's really a piece of the Canadian Armed Forces, correct? The regiment now?
Yes.
It wasn't originally. Maybe I should ask the historian guy.
Sure.
No, I'd say we were always part of the Canadian Forces or Canadian Army or Canadian Militia.
There was the militia was before Confederation though, is that right? So it was tied to the British Empire or back prior to Confederation?
Well, if you go back to 1858.
Yeah, I'm going way back.
Yeah. So you had the United Province of Canada, Canada West and Canada East. So they had an organized militia that.
Oh, did they? Okay.
That our predecessor units were part of.
Okay, and there was something in Toronto, I gather, and
sure, there were
today, I guess
units all across Canada West and Canada East, and then Canada as we know it today.
Okay, and then it's every I guess every regiment is an operational division of the Canadian Armed Forces. Is that right?
That's correct.
Do I have that correct?
Yes.
Okay, all right. And there are full-time staff, I think, correct me if I'm wrong because I'm learning myself here, full-time staff up here at the regiment. And so do you, and I don't really understand the pecking order. Maybe you can explain to us, as you did to me in the green room, about kind of the hierarchy because I don't even think non-commissioned officers is a term they use in Canada. I think that's U.S. So you're an honorary colonel, but is there a full-time colonel at?
Yes, the commanding officer of the regiment is a military lieutenant colonel.
Okay.
And he has responsibility of all of the military operations of the regiment. And he reports directly to the brigade, which directly reports to D&D in Ottawa. So the soldiers there get the exact same training as a full-time Army. They do exercises collectively. The full-time staff basically are looking after the administration of the regiment, and then the soldiers come in for their training and do their weekend training. They do summer training. They're very active year-round. They're deployed domestically. The ice storm, there's soldiers from regiments up in Fort McMurray just within the last crisis, floodings in Manitoba.
Okay.
So they're very active domestically because we're having more and more domestic issues all the time.
Yeah. So what are the skills there, Chuck, that are trained for in the regiment? Is it basic soldiering and?
Yes. There's a whole training cadre that's set out. that soldiers must qualify, you know, from a fitness standpoint, from the regulation standpoint, and then using the equipment, you know, learning how to be active fighting soldiers, ready to deploy at any time, you know, to serve the greater good of Canada and the world.
And what's the count of the regiment right now as far as
The count right now, we're running about 164 soldiers.
Really?
Yes.
Wow. Okay. And is that sort of a normal complement, or would it balloon?
Yes,
up to
it can go slightly higher, and you know, at times, you know, it's a little lower. But you know, that's what we generally have on staff at any given day.
Right. Excellent. Okay. Tell me how you got so interested in the history of the regiment. I'm intrigued that you've got a book. This has just come out, correct?
Correct. It's only been about a month. We
Oh,
had
is that
the
right?
book launch at the Armory on April 30th.
Sorry, and you had
We had a book launch on April 30th.
on April 30th?
Yeah, the
Okay.
Armory.
Can I just have a quick peek? And I'm just going to hold it up for the camera there and just see if you guys can get a picture of that. So this is the 150th. I'm not sure who's going to grab it here. One of the guys might swing over and grab it here. So 150 years. So this, where did you get some of the information in the early years? You must have done a lot of record digging.
Sure, you'd be surprised at how much information is up at Library and Archives Canada. How much in way of minor documents were saved somewhere along the line
Right.
and put away and are accessible.
Yeah.
So I found documents that went right back to 1858, signed by Captain James Wallace,
Is that a fact?
written to the Adjutant General saying, I have a group of young men in Whitby who would like to join the militia.
And so those notes would be stored up there at the armories, or?
But no, those all came from Library and Archives Canada.
Oh, did they?
in
Okay,
Ottawa.
all right. So a lot of that stuff is just kind of. How long did it take you to formulate that book?
5 years of research and writing in almost every spare minute that I had when I
Is
wasn't
that right?
at work.
Okay,
or
so it's
something else.
obviously a passion for you then.
Yes, it was, very much.
Okay, is that your first book that you've written?
First one of that size. I wrote a smaller book on the history of the Sherman tank, sort of as a getting my feet wet kind of
Okay,
exercise.
all right. And what's the big interest in history for you? It's very important to me, just so you know.
Okay.
Because I think history gets lost way too easily nowadays, and you can learn a lot from it.
From a personal point of view, I've always had an interest in history. And of course, having served in the regiment for 6 years, that specific part of history was of interest to me.
Right, right.
So when I was in the regiment back in the 80s, I read the regimental history that came out in 1951. And I thought, this is great, I love this. But the book mostly focused on World War II. And I thought, one day somebody should do a fully balanced regimental history. And maybe one day that'll be me. And that one day came.
Good for you. That's awesome. That's great. So do you talk to the gentleman down the end of the table there about history and about the vehicles he's got?
yes.
I'm sure you
Yes.
guys are connected at the hip, are
Yeah,
you?
very much, yes. Jeremy and I have been
much, yeah.
working together for the last few years.
Yeah. And how did you get involved in the museum down there?
It's actually a strange story. I actually rented a tank one day.
You rented a tank?
Yeah, I had a small company and I was doing a publicity stunt, and I found the museum that had an operational Sherman tank. Then I found out it was the Ontario Regiment Museum, and then instantly, you know, I wanted to get involved. I saw what they had. I saw that there was a need there for some of the skill sets that I had, so I started volunteering right away.
Right. So what's your background?
I'm actually in e-commerce.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. All
So
right.
yeah,
Computers by day, big heavy tanks by night.
yeah, for about 10 years, I ran an e-commerce company and did online marketing. I was so shocked growing up in Oshawa that I had never known anything about this museum.
Oh, is that
And
right? Okay.
It's a complete national treasure. So I started volunteering as their webmaster, a social media expert, getting them involved in the new media. Things started to go on from there. And my role just got larger and larger until one day I joined the board of directors. And last year, when the board was looking for an executive director, I had to sit back and say, I don't know if I want someone else to do this. This is a passion. So I gave up.
Interesting.
Yeah, I gave up my other career, at least in the short term,
Yeah.
and decided to pursue this full time.
Good for you. I can actually remember. I'm going to show my age here, but I can remember tanks running around up there, back in it would be probably 61 or 62. Well, a buddy of mine, Norm Mackey, used to live on Ralston Road right there, and we used to go up and you'd see the guys, they'd be ripping around and doing some kind of practice runs up there. This is long, I'm 63, so it's a while back now, but it's really, it's something that's stuck in my head, and you'd see the guys going over and you'd wonder how the devil they'd ever, you'd think it would be like taking a can of marbles and giving it a good shake with the guys inside. So how many pieces of rolling stock have you got up there right now then?
We actually have about approximately 71 operational military vehicles.
Is that a fact?
That is a fact. It is Canada's largest.
Where do you keep them all? Are they stored somewhere else? Or
No,
are they all up
we
there?
have them on site. We actually have several buildings now. We started with one building.
Well, I think it used to be the old Atlantis Transport Building, didn't
Yeah,
it, years ago?
that's correct.
Yeah, and that's the brown brick building up there. It's just as you're going in past the jet, it's on the left side, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
And as buildings became available on the South Field, we acquired them, added them to our lease with the city. It's funny you talk about the tanks and the Ontario's training up there in the 60s. We actually acquired the last remaining tank hangar, and it was built in the 40s. We still use it to this day for
Yeah.
storing our tanks,
Okay.
the regimental museum.
Is it one of those metal Quonset huts? Is that what it is?
No, this is actually a green Second War building. You can see it right beside the historic 420 wing.
Okay.
That's
It's right by
also-
the wing there.
That's right.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so the wing is one of those last remaining buildings. Right beside it
Yeah.
is that last remaining tank hangar
Yeah.
that we use as a tank hangar to this day.
Yeah, interesting. So, we're just about 2 minutes to go to break here, Chuck. So, just getting back to you now, have you always been involved with the regiment yourself? Because we talked a little bit in the green room there that I know Bob Chapman, Councillor Chapman.
Yes.
Bob was a colonel there, an honorary colonel, I think, there at one time. But there seems to be quite a tie when I think about Danny Matheson,
Yes.
Danny Matthews rather. There seems to be a tie with the Regiment Durham Regional Police. Is it just the way it is, or is there actually some tie back there?
Well, historically, when you look back at the end of the Second World War, many of the soldiers who returned were used to the uniformed military family and joined police services.
Right.
So there's a large number of veterans who returned that ended up being police officers. That tradition carried on, and with that, many police officers today sign up for United Nations missions
Interesting.
and
Okay.
serve in Haiti and around the world. So with that tradition, many of the officers in Durham Regional Police have
Just kind of
served
flows, eh?
in the
Yeah.
regiment.
Interesting.
I've been an associate member of the,
I know you've
quite
been
a
there
while.
for a bit. Okay,
Yeah.
we're going to scoot off to a break and we'll be
Sure.
right back. Going to come back and talk a little bit more about 150 years of service of the Ontario Regiment. We'll be right with you. Hey, welcome back. I have three gentlemen here from the Ontario Regiment. I've got Honorary Colonel Chuck Mercier, and we talked about it before. He is the former mayor of Scugog, if he looks familiar. Got Jeremy Blower, the executive director of the Ontario Museum located at the Oshawa Airport. He's down at the end of the table. Pardon me, there it is. I knew it was going to come out. And we got retired Sergeant Rod Henderson. Rod's just written a beautiful book and released it. Was it April 30th? Is that right?
That's correct, April
Yeah,
30th.
that's awesome. So we were talking a little bit about the history there, about where you were getting some of your resources from. And in the break, I talked a little bit about the Bulkley collection. And I guess it wasn't uncommon in both wars, apparently, for folks to basically march right down Simcoe Street, right through the Four Corners, all the way down to the railway station at the south end to load up on trains, correct?
That's correct. Actually, in the days before buses, that's how the regiment went to their summer training camp as well. They would march down through downtown to the train station and then take the train to Niagara or wherever they were going.
Yeah, that's where the summer training camp was Niagara. Yeah.
Often, yes.
There's probably most of the people don't realize that there was a train station down on Simcoe Street South, just south of Bloor, and there was also one, and I think it was the Canadian Pacific Station, and it was down at the end of Center Street. I remember staying on that platform before it was razed. There's nothing there now at all, but it used to be two different, I guess, spots that troops would go off. So. Now, looking at all that history, and Chuck, you alluded earlier on that we have some of the soldiers, guys and gals, I guess, have any ladies been over to Afghanistan? Any female soldiers, or not?
I don't
From
think
the
we
regiment?
had any of the females in
No,
Afghanistan.
okay, because I have met
To
some
my
others.
knowledge,
So,
yeah.
yeah, Okay.
Yeah,
There was one. I believe there was at least one.
Okay.
Yeah, one?
I stand corrected by our
Okay, very
historian.
good. Yeah,
That's why I bring him everywhere.
You
I
gotta
go.
know, eh? That's right. Well, we do have a little bit of tape, I guess, on, or as they say now, digital, I guess, on some tank demos that were happening. So let's put that up, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about that, my tank friend.
Okay, so this is a video from our Aquino Tank Weekend. This is an annual event we hold the last weekend of May each year. It's open to the public. You can see here there's some of our hardware. During this event, you actually get to see all of our vehicles. When you visit the museum at any time, there's only a select amount of them that are actually out in the field, but during this special weekend event, we'll take up the entire south field of the Oshawa Airport, and you'll be able to see all these vehicles. You see right here, we have our British desert vehicles. We actually create a small desert scene for authenticity.
Yeah.
And that's the Gulf War vehicles there. You can see inside the vehicles. This is very unique during this weekend. We open them all up, and you know, you get to really touch and hear and feel history.
Yeah, that's just wild. I had no idea you had that kind of. Is that a grizzly in the front end there? Is that what that is?
Yeah,
All the grizzlies is fine.
yeah, we have a grizzly, a cougar, and a husky, which were Canadian.
They were built in
military
London,
vehicles.
were they not? Those vehicles, I think.
Yeah, the Canadian
The
built,
Grizzlies. I
yeah.
think that they ended up getting a big contract for those. So, how do you get parts? Like, how do you access when you know? You said everything's running. There's lots of museums around that have great static displays, but when you open them up, you know, there's no motor in them or whatever.
Yeah, most
how
of them
do you
are
guys
shells.
manage to get these parts and keep things going?
Well, it's a bit of an art, and it's changed over time. Sometimes it comes right down to scrounging, manufacturing a part that doesn't exist anymore. We can get some parts from the United States through collectors. People have pieces here and there, and you know, historically, we also have received some support through things that were surplus to the Canadian Forces.
Right, okay. Do you have the ability to ship? If, like, say a movie company said, hey, we need 5 vehicles. Do you have the ability to, I guess we're doing a little plug here for the museum, but that's okay. Do you have the ability to move those vehicles around, or do they go out on movie shoots and whatnot?
Yeah, we do all the time, and that's an expanding part of what we're trying to do to increase revenue and also increase our collection.
Yeah.
For instance, the Sony picture Fury that came out a couple years ago, our Sherman tank, which is the exact same one as they used in the film in Britain, we did all the North American promos for Sony Pictures.
Oh, interesting.
You know, and throughout the years, many of our members are extras in films. If there's a tank driver in a Canadian film, he's most likely a member of the Ontario Regiment Museum.
Oh, is that right? Okay. What's the oldest vehicle you have?
The oldest vehicle we have is a 1942 MB Jeep. This is actually one of the most special vehicles in our collection because it's an actual veteran of the Ontario Regiment. It served with the Ontario Regiment in Sicily in the Second World War.
In that vehicle?
The exact vehicle, yes.
Holy cow, that's crazy. How did you manage to kind of find that?
Most of the collection was donated to the museum. I'm not sure the exact story. I've heard several stories about how that Jeep actually got back to Canada. But the early part of the collection was donated. And once the museum and the Ontario Regiment Ferret Club, which is actually a group that maintains these historical military vehicles, once that grew, they actually started finding vehicles in fields that were derelict, old farmers' fields, and starting to repair them and restore them.
Interesting.
Now we're at the point where we're actually purchasing vehicles from other collections.
Yeah, I gather there's some substantial dollars involved in buying this stuff. We're not talking, I have a tank for $1,000. You're not looking at stuff like that, right?
No, they're very significant, and it's the support of our community and our community partners that has allowed this to happen.
Yeah, right, awesome. Okay, Rod, your history book here, you said it took you 5 years?
That's correct, 5 years.
Is that right? Okay. Did it just all start on a typewriter, or did you do it online? And how
Not a typewriter, I do it on a computer.
did you? Okay, how did you get the flow in your mind straight when you did that? I mean, that's a big deal.
Well, it is fairly straightforward because things happen sequentially, although I wrote it kind of as I found groups of material from a certain era. I would say, okay, great, that's a good amount. And
So you
start
plug it
working on-
in?
and start
Okay, so
working
you
on
had
that
your
era.
time band. And what are the time bands in the book? Are they roughly 10-year spans, or?
No, not really. There's 13 chapters
Okay,
that cover
all right.
150 years. So it's
Okay. So
the first chapter covers the prehistory of the regiment, the kind
Yeah.
of military goings on that were happening in Ontario County and
Okay.
prior to 1858.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about that, because Chuck told me in the green room that there was actually, I guess, a little bit of a prisoner of war camp down at the Front Lake here at one time for the War of 1812.
Bowmanville.
Bowmanville?
Oh, you're talking about Bowmanville in
I don't
World
know.
War
You're
II,
gonna-
or
you're
were you
gonna-
talking
no,
earlier?
No,
Okay.
we're Camp 40, but Chuck was mentioning that there was, I guess, in the War of 1812, down in the harbor.
Down in the harbor, the War of 1812, we had Americans, soldiers held prisoner when they invaded Fort York.
Yeah.
They were held in Oshawa.
Okay, I missed that
That's
one. I-
1812.
Didn't know
That's
that?
before
Okay,
a
all right,
regiment.
All right, okay, that was kind of before this for sure. So, so let's talk. Tell us a couple of significant things about the early days of the regiment that kind of stick in your mind.
Well, one of the things I found particularly satisfying is most of the history of the regiment in the 1800s was just gone. No, it was never really covered at all.
Oh, really?
And so I was able to dig up a lot of different facts. For example, I don't think anyone knew that we had sent volunteers to the rebellion of 1870. I had never seen that documented anywhere. And I was able to dig up names of.
So how did you find that out?
A lot of it was just in the newspaper.
Is
A lot
that
of the
right? So
old
going
Whitby,
back just-
Whitby and Oshawa, yes, just sitting in the Whitby library going through
Holy cow.
page after page
Yeah.
and seeing something, and I would look it up, and
Yeah.
they would say, the following
Yeah. Yeah.
members had volunteered.
Now, Chuck, you can maybe answer this. There was conscription in the Second World War, correct? So kind of like a Canadian draft.
Yeah.
But prior
Yeah.
to that, I think it's just mostly it's been guys and gals putting their hands up saying, "I want to serve my country."
Volunteering has been, the backbone of the Canadian forces.
Yeah.
When the Second World War was launched, hundreds and hundreds of young men, had their attestation papers dated the same day. They stood up and were
Yeah.
proud to serve the country.
Yeah.
And that was the attitude of the day. The military was a militia, a civilian militia, where volunteers came forward.
Yeah.
And that spirit, was large then, and
Yeah.
specifically in Durham region. Our military history with the bomb girls in Ajax, Camp X
Yeah.
and Whitby,
Yeah.
the Oshawa Airport trained soldiers, and General Motors shut down manufacturing of private vehicles and worked on the war effort.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
we have a huge history in this
Yeah,
region.
I think they made wings for mosquito bombers, if I'm not mistaken. I actually had a relative that went from the Williams Piano Works to make plywood wings for some of the airplanes in General Motors. So, kind of wild. More recently, things that stuck out at you in the 40s and the 50s? In the
Well,
book?
1940s, that would be dominated by World War II, and the regiment served in Sicily and Italy.
Yeah.
Very long serving. One of the more interesting things about the Ontario Regiment, we didn't work with Canadian units very often. We were part of the 1st Canadian Armored Brigade, which was a independent brigade, so they got moved around wherever they were needed. And as a result, we often supported British or Indian Army units. So
Yeah.
the Ontario Regiment's experience in World War II was quite a bit different than most other Canadian Army regiments.
All right. Anybody from the regiment serve in the Korean conflict? You know?
That's one of those ones that's still sort of in the area of
We're not
rumor.
sure?
I never
Yeah.
saw a whole lot, but I did hear
Okay.
some people mention it. It
Yeah.
wasn't well documented.
No, and you hear often that kind of forgotten war type thing too, that we Canadians really didn't get the the recognition that they deserved regarding that. So, if somebody wants to come and visit the museum, what days can they do that, and what are the fees?
Okay,
Time
well,
for another plug.
yeah, time for a plug. So, actually, starting on Monday, we're open 7 days a week for most of the rest of the summer, and it's only a $5 admission to come into the museum, and I can assure you that it's going to be one of the best regimental museums in the country.
Do you have a family pass? Like, do you have a family rate as well, or?
Well, for our events, we have had that.
Yeah.
It's $5 for adults, a toonie for children, toddlers and little ones free.
Right.
Cadets and veterans are always welcome for free.
Okay, awesome, good stuff. Okay, if they want to pick up a copy of that book, my friend, where would they get it? We got about a minute left.
They can buy it at the museum, and they can also buy it online through the Regiment's museum,
Is that right?
ontariomuseum.ca.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Will we see it in Amazon any day soon, do you think? Or?
I don't think so. I think we're
No?
keeping it fairly
You sure?
tight.
You never. Oh, is that right? You can keep it tight control on it. Okay. Okay, Chuck. I'm going to let you have the last word here. So we're going to sign off here shortly. Thoughts on your time with the regiment?
Well, it's always a great deal of pride being able to serve your country and to work with excellent people that are committed to, our community in safety and preserving our rights and freedom. It's outstanding. On this our 150th year, I wanted to plug September 17th. We have rented the GM Center, and we're having a dinner with 500 seats available.
Awesome.
So get a sponsor to
All
do
right.
a table, and come on out to the
different.
celebration.
Okay, gentlemen, thanks so much for your service and your time here, and thanks for keeping history alive. That's it for another Talk Durham. I'm Don Pitman. We got a blast out of here. We'll see you next time. Be well.